I don't know. Typically, Dave, it's like there's the four of us plus Exeter TV. All right, I'm going to start the meeting off. Good afternoon. As chair of the Facilities Advisory Committee, I am declaring that an emergency exists, and I'm invoking the provisions of RSA 91A. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with this determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to the public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. If in fact anybody has a question or there's a raise hand feature, you can use that raise hand feature for us to be able to answer any questions. And we're going to start the meeting with a roll call and just identify yourself and if there's anybody else in the room. Amanda Kelly.
Hi, yep, I'm here and nobody else is in the room.
Chris Weeks.
Yes, here, and I'm alone in my room.
Peter Lennon.
I'm here and no one's in the room with me.
And Robert Corson, and I am here alone with myself. All right. Well, it's been a while since we've talked. How is everybody? Good? You survived Thanksgiving?
We did.
It's good to know.
How are you?
I'm good. I luckily we're all COVID free. So
yes.
Anybody
had a test yet?
I've had some. Only because I had to have them to go to some facilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a test back in. Have you been tested, Chris?
Yeah, I get tested twice a week.
Yeah, you probably do it anyways, right? As part of your process.
Yeah. I'm at school buildings all over the city, so.
Right.
Yeah, I get. So far, so good.
Yep. Yeah, it's nothing like a little tickle up the nose. Meeting minutes. Do we have any outstanding meeting minutes that we need to approve?
We have, both October 29th and November 12th, which were sent out to you guys, I'd say early November.
Yeah, I just looked at those today. The October one is fine, and my only...
No, October 29. October 29.
I said October is...
Did you say the October one? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said it's fine. And then the November one, I missed that meeting. So my only note on that one is that I was listed as an attendee when I didn't actually go.
Okay, thanks.
Otherwise, it looked good.
Thank you.
Amanda, did you have an opportunity to look at those?
I know I did a long time ago. I looked at them right when they came in. So now I don't remember if I had any. Can I just peruse it briefly?
Yes, you can.
So I know I already looked at it.
Look at the...
Yeah, okay, the October 29th one, I didn't have anything about.
The other one was our tour, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up. Okay.
Yeah, that was the Parks and Rec tour that I missed. How was that, by the way?
Very good, I thought.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good refresher. I mean, it's been a while since I've been through through the building, and also through the I don't know what you would call it, the community center, the building as well.
Right.
We did not get to sample the museum.
Oh, the fire museum there?
Yeah, fire museum.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't been in the rec building before, so I'm sorry I missed that.
Well, I'm sure that if any time you want to go, in fact, it probably, if it's less than two people, and sometimes it's easier to go on these things than trying to get the whole group. And they're very, very accommodating, very helpful. But I think it's, to me,
Take away.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I just say it's a good thing to go take a look and just see the facility, but also just generally have them reviewing and talking about how they see their program.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that sometime.
Yeah, I excuse me. I thought it was really helpful. I had never been in any of those three facilities. We also went to the garage. And I thought the biggest takeaways were that the highest priority maintenance list item on the maintenance list that Russ showed us for $25,000, which was a Parks and Recreation ventilation and reflooring project, was not the Parks and Recreation Department's highest priority. Their highest priority was to deal with other aspects of the ventilation as it relates to COVID and the acquisition of HEPA filters, portable HEPA filters. And they basically said that the reflooring is a nice to have, but not necessary now. So I think there's a disconnect between them and the parks and the DPW as far as what they're spending that first amount of money for. And frankly, that $25,000, as far as I'm concerned, we ought to ask for the FCA, but that's a separate issue. The other takeaway was that when we talked to them about their garage facility at 32 Court Street, we asked them about whether they had talked to DPW about accommodating any Parks and Recreation vehicles, equipment, whatever the words are, at the new Parks and Recreation building. And they said there had not been any of those discussions. So if the DPW is trying to sell this garage or include in this garage stuff related to the Parks and Recreation Department, they haven't had a discussion to find out exactly what it is that the Parks and Recreation Department could use or would find helpful. So that's a pretty big disconnect as far as I'm concerned, as it relates to the DPW garage facility. And then the rest of it was, and it's in the minutes. You can read the minutes about the rest of it.
Yep, I saw that.
I think one thing to keep, so I just finished the minute, sorry about that, but everything was fine, so we can go back to that. One thing that I do remember, just to make sure we characterize it right, I think that the way Greg described it, he's not interested in having the equipment be moved for just because it would make like his programming, or I mean that's the wrong word, but like directing those workers would become really difficult if all the equipment was way down the other side of town. So I'm not sure that he wants that. So it is definitely an oversight if it should be happening, but it didn't seem like he wanted it to be happening.
Yeah. This has been a long-standing debate about where things go out of, who staffs what things, and ultimately that's not necessarily our purview, but I think it does have to do with space utilization and their needs. So that was one of the things my takeaway was the the balance between what you have for facilities and the programs being offered. Mm-hmm. It's kind of how I would characterize that, is that there was an appetite for a lot more program than there was space that can actually meet the needs of that program.
Are we talking specifically about Parks and Recreation, or are we talking about the facility?
Parks and
Recreation. Are we talking about the garage? We're done with the garage, right?
No, but I think to me, I include all of it. I mean, to all their programs. So the idea of park maintenance and park improvements is part of their purview. The idea of offering recreational, both sports recreation as well as classes with pottery and painting and other programs. There's some oversight of the Meals on Wheels and some, not necessarily oversight of them, but some sharing of resources. So to me, it was an interesting look at kind of where they see themselves and what they would like to see for services in the future. So,
yeah.
Do you want me to change any of the minutes to reflect any of what you guys have both said?
No, because I think
Amanda?
No.
That's, to me, those are my impressions, and I don't think we didn't necessarily discuss them. We didn't really talk about them. We were just, as far as I was concerned, that's what I heard, and my impressions, literally what took place.
Did you guys get into talking about the proposed new facility with them at all?
No, I mean, my impression is that part of their goal was to show their facility, talk about some of the things that were not working well for them, and then some of their goals for the future. So to me, I think it begs for a lot further discussion about, ultimately, I know they did a needs assessment for the community, and I read the needs assessment, and when we went to that, what I found was that the needs assessment, they still didn't match. I mean, there seemed to be a lot more programs and other things, that goals that they had that were, and it's not a bad thing. I think goals are a good thing. Goals to, have other services, music classes, art classes, other recreational pieces.
You mean in contrast to what the survey found?
Yeah, I think the survey was, to me, what in general, what I found about the needs assessment is that when you do a needs assessment, you have to look at what other resources are available within the community, both from a private and or another nonprofit that's offering similar services. Mm-hmm. And then you do a kind of a gap analysis to what they're providing versus what the community needs are. And then you would have a kind of where they see themselves filling that gap. And what I saw was that some of those things that we talked about weren't necessarily identified as other resources. Like we talked about, as far as the musical arts is a program, and it's a nonprofit that runs music out of the old high school. There's arts as well that run out of there. There's a lot of other programs that are run throughout the community. And part of that would be is how do you pull all those together as a resource for everyone to be able to say, hey, by the way, if I want to take a music class, I can go either the Parks and Rec, I can go to here, I can go here, I can go here, as other resources. Because I think ultimately Parks and Rec should be a resource, right? You should be able to go to them and be referenced to other resources if you don't necessarily have them available.
A hub.
So did you go through the meeting minutes, Amanda?
Yes, all set.
All right. So all in favor of approving the meeting minutes from the October, what was it, Peter?
October 29 and November 12.
October 29th and November 12th.
And I'll make the change on Chris on November 12th.
So we do the 29th first since Chris wasn't at the 12th one. So Amanda?
Yes, I approve.
Chris?
Yes, approve.
Peter?
Yes, approve.
And myself, Robert Corson, approved. Now on the November 7th. Amanda?
12th.
Oh, sorry, 12th, sorry.
Approve.
Peter?
Yes, approve.
And myself, Robert Corson, approved.
I approve too. Well, I guess if I wasn't there, but I don't, if I'm not there, does that mean I can't approve or?
I would say you can't approve, but that's,
Okay.
you can
All right.
approve it.
Well, there was, Peter did characterize the meeting that we had with the BRC in there, and I did agree with all of that. So,
Yeah, no, he did it.
That's true.
I think he represented you fairly.
yes, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
RFP status, we have no status. As far as I know, it hasn't gone anywhere. Haven't seen anything posted. So, so it's the same as it has been, same as it ever was.
Hanging.
And that's incumbent upon the town to post. We don't post it.
Correct.
Correct.
I always forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
On project report,
Should we do,
go ahead.
before we finish that? I mean, do we just sit and wait? Do we just hope to get around to it? Or is there something we can do to, I mean, how hard is it for them to put it out? I guess.
Not hard.
No, seriously.
No, I
I
agree.
mean, how hard is it for them to put it out? They've slow rolled us for at least a year on the funding. How hard is it for them to put the darn thing out? And what is it we have to do to get them to do that? Do we have to complain to the select board? I'm not saying we should, but I do want to ask what is it we should do?
So on the, did we, my recollection was that were there any modifications that we had discussed?
No, it's ready to go, except just maybe put some dates to it.
Yeah. So I think that part of this, to me, Peter's going to be part of our discussion for in the new business section, both the assessment of 2020 and the 2021 goals.
Yeah, great.
Because I think there's a lot of looking back and looking forward to see where we've been and where we're going and how do we get there.
Great.
I don't, as far as any of these other ones, I really don't have any updates to library, parks and rec, public safety, the cupola repair. I know it's done. I can only assume that it was successful. It's still up there. and they hung some lights in it, so it's got to be structurally stable enough to hang some lights in it. So looks good.
Do we care about the ultimate cost for it?
Yeah, it would be great to know,
I'd like to know.
because it really does play
I'd like to
into.
know how extensive the repairs turned out to be.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a good. Maybe part of our request would be is to maybe we could get in our next meeting get Jeff to give us a little background on maintenance projects and both what's been done in 2020 and then what he's got scheduled for 2021.
Can you remind me who Jeff is? Sorry.
Jeff is the maintenance director.
Did we meet him the day at DPW?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
So he's the one who kind of gave us the tour.
Yep. Perfect.
Did have another request from Bill Campbell, who's really from the Conservation Commission, to offer a tour and a visit to Rains Farm. I said we discussed it at this meeting to see about setting something up. This would have to be obviously probably either earlier in the day or some other time so it's still light out. So if people are interested in doing that, trying to figure out when that could happen, if it's in either early morning or kind of mid-afternoon, whether there's an opportunity for people to get that visit in.
Are you looking for potential times, you mean?
I don't yet. I could send out just a request for people to put something forward as far as a time. Obviously, if it was 2 or less, then it's not a quorum. It doesn't have to be posted. Doesn't have to go through all the other processes. So we could go 2 people and then 2 people.
Okay. No, I'd like to see it. I've been working remotely on Fridays, so anytime on a Friday I could go.
Okay. It's good to know.
And I'd be happy to, do something Friday morning. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing it. I mean, we're really only talking about what, next week? And the week after, yeah.
Yeah, next week's the last full week before the Christmas week.
Yeah. So do we want to try to, I'd be happy to try to do it.
Yeah, we could shoot for next Friday.
How's that for you, Amanda?
I can be there. The earliest I can be there is probably like 9:05. I have an 8:45 chiropractor, and that's very fast. Okay. So
that's pretty civilized, though.
Not 9:06.
I'll fly down no.
Don't get arrested.
That's good, Amanda. It gives the sun a chance to come up, so it won't be like super freezing cold when we get there.
Yeah. So I'll reach out to Bill and see what if that works. So say 9:15, 9:30. Yeah. Friday as a tour time. I'd say just in general that really didn't hear much. Next on the item was a budget committee. Really didn't get much report back on that from either our recommendations or some of the other requests that went back to both them and to DPW for our $25,000 budget. It also went to Daryl and Russ as well.
Can I just ask the budget cycle? Where are we at in the? I know you guys know this better than I do. I know Peter, you know off the top of your.
No, I don't. So I'm glad you're asking.
The budget committee has gone through and given all of their information and recommendations have been completed, and now it goes to the select board. The select board conducts a few public meetings regarding the budget. There is a mid-January kind of timeline where they have to approve the budget, and then the ballot would be reflecting that approval.
So
was something posted?
They'll post in their agendas whether they're going to cover the budget. And I think, Rob, don't they have to have a public hearing, at least one formal public hearing?
Yes.
On the budget?
I think actually sometimes it's 2.
Yeah. And the budget committee chair normally presents the overview of the budget at one of these meetings by the select board. And then the select board, goes through to whatever extent they're interested in any of the individual line items or any of the issues they see are buried in the budget. Or not even buried, or just in the budget. So that's our opportunity again to finish our participation in the budget process this year, is to go to the select board with a letter of recommendation and possibly to speak there. A. B, that's also our last shot, I think, to get the $25,000 for the FCA. We might have to make that case. If we get no support from Russ, we're going to have to use whatever political influence we may or may not have with the select board.
So when you said there's going to be public hearing and it's going to be presented, is there any like Excel doc that like goes out that we can see, or or is that only after it goes to the budget, the select board?
No, I believe that there's Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob.
There is a draft, and the recommendations do come out from the Budget Recommendations Committee.
Okay.
That's all public knowledge.
Perfect.
At the latest, they're in the packet for whatever select board meeting starts their participation. That doesn't mean we can't get it earlier, which we might want to consider as a town committee. But at the latest, I believe it would be in the packet that's posted online at the first meeting. So we have to ask ourselves then, do we also want to get there to see at least what they did with our recommendations?
I mean, I'd be curious to see what they settled on for the public works, public safety and public works.
I think they went with the $100,000.
Okay.
And the other one way, Amanda, is if you go on to the website, you can actually go and view the meeting, basically stream the recording.
Oh, and see what they came up with in real time versus a document. Gotcha.
And the beauty of that is you can actually fast forward to versus sitting there painstakingly with every word that comes out.
But it's much easier just to get the documents, isn't it, Rob? Instead of sitting through the whole. No, seriously.
It is.
Yeah, instead of having to go through.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting to me, though, sometimes is watching how it's couched and how it's presented. I think to me helps to understand when they do write down the number what the thought process was, and there was a similar to your meeting. There was already a determination about what was going to happen there.
Right. No, I agree with you, Rob. Yeah.
No.
But if they've gone for 100,000 for the public safety study, and it's built on a set of assumptions that we disagreed with, and we have to determine also, what we say about that in our letter to the select board. If we decide to send a letter, which I'm assuming we are, but that's just my assumption.
That's good. It's a good question. I think that the letter that we sent and copied them on we could elaborate on that letter specifically and highlight the areas that we are not in agreement with on the approach. It may not be the approach; it would be the dollar value, and at that point, we'd have to talk about what we see as being a difference in approach.
Right, because that dollar value was based on the approach of only evaluating less. I can't remember what it was, but if it was one site or right.
Basically, it
was
like,
a one-op.
Yeah. I think if you guys, the conversation you had with them at that your meeting seemed to be very similar to what I saw on during the public meeting, which was that they really were focused on reuse of the existing fire station and moving police out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, they had already settled on a program, or at least, which sites were going to be used for what.
Yeah, which kind of denies the town the opportunity to have any input, except in the budget process. And I don't know whether the town's going to, if it's going to throw up on the 100,000 or not.
I don't think it'll matter. I think the issue is that, going back to having project successes, the reality is this is ripe for the idea that when it does get down to two separate facilities, one being built on Epping Road at $4.5 million and another $6-7 million to be spent on renovating the existing facility, are people going to choke on the idea of $10 million projects that did anybody ever look at anything else? Did anybody ever, think about blank? The reality is we didn't go through the process. So all we have no ammunition to basically either support, say, yes, this is the right decision, or no, it's not. There's no documentation. There's nothing to support an attitude towards this. So,
yeah, we'll be going back to the exact same thing that happened with the last big project.
Yep.
Exactly the same.
Yep. And in fact, Rob, Bob Kelly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, Bob Kelly at one point was talking about 8 to 15 million for the Epping Road project. So I don't know where he got that number, but he was talking about, he didn't say anything about how much it would cost to renovate the existing building. And I'm guessing that's at least 5 to 10 million. And then he was talking about somewhere between 8 and 15 for the new building. Did they at the meeting mention 4.5 or anything like that, Rob, when they talked about the second site off Empty Road?
And there was no dollar value then it put into that number about what the total project might be.
Yeah, I don't remember, Peter, what they said. That 8 to 15, I don't even remember that. But I just remember that we had asked about like a budget number or, setting a budget number. And I don't remember anything. They didn't respond specifically with any kind of number.
Right.
For that.
I mean, I'll check my notes, but my reaction was that the cost of both projects was probably going to be difficult to win, Rob. So that reinforces your statement about, are we, basically, going to lose the opportunity to get town approval by following the budget committee's plan? Yeah, because it's not really supported by any analysis.
No. Well, yeah.
And there's no even initial design or program to evaluate to even come up with a budget cost. We just have no idea. No clue.
No.
Now, that does raise that does raise the question about whether or not we need to meet with the police and fire department. Chris tried to contact them before the budget committee meeting where they decided these, so that we could, get some information about whatever the budget committee thought was the solution. And did indeed the police department and the fire department both agree that that really was what they wanted to do? We haven't done that. So we've only got the budget committee's hand waving that this is what the police and fire department want to do.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we need to, if we're going to differ with their approach, do we need to hear from the police and fire department in some way before we differ?
Anybody want to have something to say about that?
Yeah, I don't think we need to check in with them. I think, the police and fire, it's not their main goal in life to steer this new facility. I think they're just kind of saying what they think to say to get something. But I think ultimately, what we propose is to have the feasibility study done with cost estimates. I think that's the best way to determine what our options are and how much they'll cost.
Well, I agree with you, Chris, but the first time Bob Kelly says, well, we talked to the police and fire departments and they're happy as clams to do what we want. what's our response? You got to do a study for $50,000 more, and don't believe the police and fire department.
I'm not saying don't believe them. I just think they're open to a few options. And if the BRC says, here, this is what we're going to give you, it's better than what you've got now. I can see them saying, sure, we'll agree to that. We'll agree to something. So,
and ultimately, I think it should be the taxpayers of Exeter who are really the people that need to be vetting this project, not the department heads of the police and fire. And it's a community resource, and that ultimately us, four people that are here, we all need to be participating in it. And I think this is what's happening is that I don't think any department head should be given the carte blanche to say what or determining where their long-term destiny is. So
I agree with everything you guys have said, but politically, Bob Kelly's going to get up and argue that. And if we're going to say we disagree with that approach, if all we have is we haven't checked lately with the departments and we're only going on what they told us in August and in July, then Bob Kelly's going to say, well, we've talked to them as recently as October and November. And we're gonna be less able to make the case to the select board. I'm not talking about what you guys are saying because I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just talking about the politics of sitting in front of the select board and saying you guys ought to not do what the budget recommendation committee wants. And the reason for that is A, B, C, and D.
I think one of the reasons of A, B, C, D is that the public input is being flipped to the wrong side. So regardless of what the department heads might want or how recent anybody's talked to them, I don't care. What I care about is that if we're already picking a location and exactly where the building's going to go, and then we're talking to the town about, do you like this or not after the fact? Here's the one thing, do you like it or not? And the abutters and all the issues that we've had in the past with buildings. It's the wrong direction. We should have 3, get the public input on the 3, then work from that. To have public input on one building, it's black and white. There's nowhere for it to go except pass luckily or fail. And the abutters meetings were way too late in the rec process and those sorts of things. So that's...
I agree with you, and I'm not arguing against anything you guys have said on a factual basis or an approach basis. I'm talking about the politics.
But I think that you can say that to the select board, and that's plenty. That trumps everything else, in my opinion. The public input's not there.
I guess, Peter, what I'm having trouble with is if we go back to them and say, hey, you could do what the BRC says, or you could say support our attempt at the study. And I'll say, which one do you want? And they'll probably say yes. They're just looking for any help from anybody that can give it to them. So I actually get what you're saying in terms of the political attempt. Maybe there is something to it in terms of being able to speak to that at a meeting in front of the select board. Maybe that's a worthwhile thing to do, just to check in and say, hey, they support our efforts too. Maybe that's necessary. And I would say if you want to do that, feel free to reach out to those guys and make contact and try to get their thoughts on it.
And I think ultimately it could be somebody tasked with having that conversation. So instead of it doesn't necessarily have to be entire group, but we could be a representative of the facilities advisory committee that actually reaches out to them. And then it's not a public meeting. It's basically like the other discussions. It's, just from a citizen to one of the department heads. And I agree with Peter, I agree with you 100% about politically the issue is that if we want if we believe that truly enough that this process needs to be include the voters and include people and include them in the process, that we need to make that argument, and the argument probably does need to be made at the select board level, not at, we're beyond the other parts of it. So we've got So Peter, do you want to reach out to them, or what's your thought?
Well, somebody's got to do it. I can't tell you that I have any more time than anybody else. Let's teach Mark the rubric of what is it? Never miss a committee meeting when they're handing out tasks and assignments.
Oh, what a great idea! Who votes to have Mark reach out to them?
Yeah, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we need to, Amanda's, your original question is a good one, is what is that timeline, and when would we need to go to that next meeting to either support our recommendation? So I think we need to get that onto our calendar to figure out when that is.
Well, because we met with, I missed that meeting, but we had the committee had the tour at Public Safety and met, and they were there, right? The chief and...
Yeah, the deputy chief of police and the chief of the fire department was there. Yep.
And the last I remember, just from reading the minutes, and this is a while ago, was that the program hadn't been decided, like based on the public safety study from, was it last year? The program had not been decided yet. And then we've only heard through the grapevine that the program has been decided. So I think it's reasonable to circle back and say, hey, at our last meeting, it hadn't been decided. Can you confirm that you've decided this, or are you still open? This is what we really, we're hoping to see more analysis of different sites. Is that?
I think that's an accurate representation, which is, I think what I hear from Chris is that these department heads are in a facility that's substandard.
Right.
They'll do anything.
Mm-hmm.
They will promise anything to get out of that facility.
So we just need to know that they're flexible, and that's not their gold. That's not their line in the sand, that they're just flexible. And that's one thing they'd be comfortable with.
Right.
I can try to have that conversation. It maybe be good to have two of us, but I can try to be the, I don't exactly know how to reach out and whatnot, but I can try.
Yeah, you can just call their offices and
ask to speak
and
with
ask
each
to speak
of them.
to them. Yeah.
If we feel that it's really necessary, which 2 minutes ago I was the one arguing that it wasn't, but if we feel as a group that we really want to do it, I will do it.
I mean, Peter makes a good point in terms of, making sure we have the latest information before we speak to the select board. And Peter's a much better veteran of Capitol Hill battles than I am. So he's keen. I defer to your wisdom in those areas. So there is a lot of truth to what you're saying.
I thank you. I appreciate that. I can also tell you that when I tried with Nico, Bob Kelly, Judy Rowan, and I tried to cut 2 personnel out of the fire department 3 years ago on the basis of the fact that they had not done the public safety study, which later, 2 years later recommends they needed the 2 people. But there were a whole variety of issues why it was premature. The first person that got up said, I'd be dead now if it wasn't for the fire department. And there was just an unending stream of people just saying the fire department said they needed it. So that's part of the scar tissue about why I recommend we go to them this time. So thank you. So I'll write, Amanda, if you could do that.
Do we have it written down? So it's in the minutes. What we heard is the latest programming choice preference.
Well, I don't know if they have one. I just know, yeah.
We don't know if they have, but what we've heard is written somewhere, so I can reference it.
I
feel like a journalist now.
I think that's a good. It's a good question.
Wait. It's in. I put it in the minutes. I apologize.
Ask them to confirm or
actually
deny it.
One thing I remember.
It is the minutes. Yeah, it is in the minutes for November 12th, Amanda.
Okay, the one I just read.
So it's number 2. It's under informal FAC reps discussion with budget committee reps.
Okay.
And then there's, in addition to what they talked about with Chris and me, the next item is what we actually decided to do. And we, in part, had differences, and those differences are impartially summarized as well. So it's in those minutes, November 12th.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I remember when we did our meeting and tour there is that there was a comment that the police chief did not want to be in the downtown site. So I think that's pretty consistent. And now the BRC is saying a new police facility on Epping Road while the fire department stays downtown. I think we kind of got a gist that the chiefs were open to that when we did our tour. Okay. So I don't think that's changed.
But it would be interesting to see whether or not they've signed up to what the budget committee really wants, or whether they would prefer to have a feasibility study and the analysis of alternatives. That's pretty critical.
Yeah.
Because yes, I agree with Chris about what they indicated. But they also, it's kind of in part like, who's the latest people to talk to them?
Right.
They're trying to be so amenable. They're trying to be so helpful. They're trying to not, they see they've got momentum to get something. So, they're going to stand up and salute.
Yeah. And
even if it's not the best idea.
And the reality is ultimately that by doing this in a more systematic way, you may determine that there are benefits to having them together. There are shared services, there's coverage, there's a call center, there's a infrastructure that's associated with survivability. There's a lot of other things that would be considered beyond just, I just don't want to be downtown, or I'll just take I think that what I find is the I just don't like that. I don't want to be downtown. To me, that's not an answer. That's just it's a gut feeling.
Yeah.
It's really not backed up by anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And we don't know, for years, the fire department was arguing about getting the second fire station on Epping Road because they wanted to be in the western end of the community. And that in part was driven by Riverwoods. But the town never bought that either. And the town was really happy to keep them down in downtown. And so I have I don't know if you go downtown and you take a poll of all the residences and all of the businesses in the downtown area, whether or not they'd be happy with the police department over off Epping Road. But that's the virtue of having the public input that we've accommodated in the RFP outline for the proposal that we want to support or have supported.
So, going back to that RFP, I remember when we were working on it live on Zoom. Who initiated that? Okay, you drafted it, and that was for our recommendation. We wrote that in our recommendation.
Yeah. It was to support what the process should be, and what it was also used to derive a kind of an estimate of what that might be.
Yeah, because
the dollar signs need.
Yeah, just to step back too, like originally what this town wanted to do was spend $400,000 on pretty much early design, kind of like what they did with the rec centers. So we were proposing to step back from that and analyze different options first and get some cost estimates before we do a lot of design work.
And get community input.
Yes, correct.
And I think that's ultimately, like you said, Amanda, is that, can you imagine the rollout, next year of sitting there in front of the community and saying, we've looked at these options. Here are some of the benefits of these things. That included a survey of our community of what they thought was important to them as part of our public safety needs.
Well, so I'm wondering, is there, who's going to, if they're not going to use our RFP, who's going to write one to use this money? Let's say they're granted this money. How are they going to find the contractor to use this money with? What's the RFP going to be? Who's going to make that?
That would be Dave and the town.
Okay.
The town planner and Russ. And
good question. But it's a good question. I mean, if Dave and Russ decide that they're going to support the budget committee's recommendation, then they'll go to, whatever stable of contractors they have, and they'll put it out to bid for $100,000. And it's going to be a much more narrow, presumably much more narrow, one solution focused analytical effort.
I'm not even sure there's going to be any analytics that's going to go into it. I think it's going to be they're going to sit down and, similar to what I saw at the garage, it's going to be, by the way, I want, a parking places for 42 cars. I want a place for my pool table. I want a place for my pony. I want a place for my, this is my cynical side. As opposed to data-driven information. I think ultimately from the public safety side of things, it really should be a data-driven for some of this. And also community input about, you look at, especially in 2020, we're talking about a completely different view on what a public safety and what community policing is and what community activism and action is. To me, I think it's a big mistake just to have a knee-jerk reaction and say, put them out on Epping Road.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the time when there's been the best and most conversation about being embedded and being part of the community, and that just severs entirely, and it just keeps a huge block between policing and the community. It just seems
and I think
totally in opposition to everything we've talked about in the last year.
Yep. I just checked the agenda for last Monday's select board meeting, and on the agendas, I don't know if they did it, was a budget committee recap. So I can't. It's under budget recommendations committee recap was one of the discussion action items. I don't know what they did and whether they did anything other than, because they had a bunch of other stuff, other than just to take Bob's statement about the committee actions and then say, well, we'll deal with this later in the month or in January. But that's out there. So the next meeting is the 21st, and there's no agenda posted for the select board yet, or packet or anything else. So the train's beginning to move. And so I don't know, Rob, I guess, would you be the one to try to talk to Nico to find out, where they are and by when they need our recommendation and all of that kind of stuff?
Here's my thought, is that since Daryl is our select board rep, is to reach out to Daryl and find out, one is, are the times for these meetings not work for him? Is there a better time for us to set it up so that we can have a more direct line and better information that he's getting from us. I know he's getting meeting notes and things like that. So I think having a representative for our group at the select board meeting is really critical. And I think that's, Peter, going back to your political question, I think that's one of the things we're suffering from is lack of representation, and we need to figure out how we get that taken care of.
Okay, I agree with what you said in the last respect, that we need political help and we need to figure out how to best get that organized. I am concerned, no disrespect to Daryl, but his what's the word I want? His interest in, awareness of, and knowledge about what we do and what we think is important is non-existent because he's had other priorities. And I don't know what his other priorities are. I'm not going to argue with those. I'm going to respect those.
No,
so,
I would say that as a beginning
if
step.
you feel it's necessary, yeah, let me urge you as a beginning step, I agree with you. I think it's good protocol to do that, not to cut him out of the loop. But if you can get a sense from him whether or not he would prefer you to go directly to Nico, that would be good too.
Yep.
Yeah, I would definitely like to ask him definitely too, if just the timing. I mean, I think we sort of decided that, so that's a really good thing to loop back to for sure.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, right now I find that we're ineffective, and part of the evaluation is why are we ineffective and what can we do to make ourselves more effective in the future. And I think that kind of plays into what the other two items are, is ultimately what happened in 2020 and what were the things that didn't go well. So what did go well, and what do we need to do to move things forward? Because I'm not interested in status quo forever. I've got other things to do.
Agreed. So do you want to get into that?
Yeah, let's talk about 2020 things we did that were good.
I made a list of about 10 items. Would it be easier for me to just run down the list and see if people say, yeah, no, don't put it in, it's nothing, or, and you forgot this, you forgot that?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be a comprehensive. I think it's going to be the top 10 would be great.
Okay. Okay, the first is our report to the select board on the Parks and Recreation project back in last January 17th. The second is a site visit to the DPW complex on the 30th of July. The third is a site visit to the Public Safety Complex, August the 13th. The fourth is a site visit to the library, October 1st. The fifth is a site visit to the Parks and Rec Complex at 32 Court Street, November 12th. The sixth is the recommendations to the Planning Board about the CIP projects and the fact that the Planning Board accepted our $200,000 recommendation, vice the $400,000 and the approach that we recommended. The seventh is the letter to the Budget Recommendations Committee on those projects. We can obviously even put in a meeting with the Budget Recommendation. Well, I put that later on. Anyway, the eighth is finalizing the FCA RFP. The ninth is drafting the outline for the town planner for the public safety complex analysis of alternatives and feasibility study. And the 10th was meeting with the budget committee reps to discuss how both our committees can work well together in analyzing the CIPs. I must have missed something, but you know, do you want me to throw any of this stuff out?
No, I think that's a good list. I think obviously navigating virtual meetings was
Okay, got it. Anything else? Anyway, if there's something else.
Yeah, I haven't given it as much thought as you, Peter. So that's a good list. I can't think of anything really notable that you missed.
But whether or not it's on this list, if you think of something, don't assume it's on the list and just shoot me emails.
Yep.
And that's obviously for everybody. Amanda, Rob. I don't know what we do with Mark on this one. I get the minutes out.
He'll be as recognizes that those are accomplished. And again, these aren't something to be voted on. I think they're just recognition of what we've tried to do and what we actually have done. And then we can also talk about the effectiveness of any of those.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had what I called shortfalls, and I think Rob, you characterized them better. Let's call it effectiveness, impacts. I don't know what the word is. I'll make up some euphemism. I had three. The politically correct would be is areas that there are room for improvements. Got it. Room. Okay. So here's, again, do you want me, I've got three of them. Do you want me to just shoot them out and then
let's hear them.
Rob, did you? All right. The first is that we just have not followed up on the major recommendations we put into the Parks and Recreation report at the beginning of the year. We had 3 or 4 or 5 things that we thought were really important before the town should decide on the Parks and Rec project. They included a recreations kind of master plan, or at least some kind of assessment of all the various recreation facilities we already have. It included the fiscal analysis, which, we wanted to see at least 10 years out of the debt limit and the financial impacts of various CIP projects. Russ said he did that. Right. But I don't know if he's shared that with anybody. Rob, has he shared that with anybody?
My understanding is that there was a debt analysis that was part of the CIP package this year, but it did not include a lot of projects. I've seen it.
Right. And it's in the back. Right. There's a table in the back, but it doesn't include a lot of the things. So that's out there as something that we thought was important, at least at the time in January. I would argue it's still important. But there are other things in there like that that we haven't followed up on. And I personally would think that since we didn't write all that stuff just for our own benefit, as opposed to the town's benefit, and we thought there was value to them, we have to consider what we do next to let them know we're serious, and they can't just yaya us and slow roll us about what we say. So, because we're not going to go away.
So let's just take what other ones you have on there, Peter? You said you had 3.
Okay. The lack of follow-up on the information from the DPW on both the pricing, the revised escalation factors, or the revised adding the years for more escalation for the delay in the garage, as well as the whole issue about what kind of building they're talking about. Is it 15,000 square feet, or is it the 39,000+ square foot building? At one point, Rob, you were going to try to get in touch with Jennifer, and you haven't had a chance. I'm quite confident, or she's blown you off. But that's the second thing, because I know you guys disagreed, and I obviously ultimately agreed with you about not making a recommendation about the garage project because we didn't have that information, as opposed to going with recommending 0. I defer to you on that, but I really think that we need to try to be in a position to actually make a recommendation to the select board. And that's how we can be the most valuable to them, is to actually make a recommendation, not to say we don't have the information to make the recommendation. Mm-hmm. So that means we got to do something about getting the information. And I don't know whether it's Russ slow rolling us, or whether it's Jennifer slow rolling us, or anybody else who just doesn't care what we do. But if we care what we do, I think we need to follow up on that. The third is the woeful lack of cooperation on getting the FCA funded. Now, at some point, our delays in getting the RFP done contributed to losing funding opportunities because, as time went on, they just used the money for what they thought were priorities. And we didn't have anything that we could compete with their priorities because we didn't have the RFP done. Now that we have the RFP done, and now that we've had it done for several months, I think we really need to push hard on that somehow. So those are my three.
Amanda, do you have any items for kind of room for improvement?
Yeah, I think I would have just sort of taken some of the similar ideas and just summarized them in a different way and saying that I feel like the issue is that we don't have like the foundational guidance that we need in order to evaluate all projects that come before us.
Yep.
So that is the debt analysis, right? That fits in there. That is the FCA that fits in there. That is one thing that I'm really happy that we did was we sort of got to this draft sort of template RFP that would be kind of guiding that we have shared now. And we could alter and sort of help to kind of share with department heads in the future, right? Like it would have been nice if we had that document to have given to Parks and Rec in the beginning of the project and said, these are the things we're going to be looking at. And then, as Peter said, there were other things that we said weren't in their project that maybe we need to add to our RFP. I think there was something about stormwater. I'm not sure if it was in ours, but it just seems like our foundational guiding documents aren't in place in order to be able to evaluate projects.
I would agree with that. Anything else?
From me, no.
Chris?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on the big things. So one thing I would ask is, we had an informal meeting with the BRC
Tools
to kind of come up with ways to cooperate and I guess work together better. And I'm not sure if in our one meeting we've kind of blown that up. I don't know if either of you have spoken to anybody on the BRC.
Yeah, I've talked to Bob since.
Okay, what did he have to say as a result of that?
I think recognizing that we didn't necessarily share eye to eye on this particular scenario, but we should continue with that process, though. We should continue with trying to get together. And that would be similar to what Amanda was saying, is I think that we need to improve some of our turnaround. And I think it goes back to what Peter's saying too, is some of our turnaround on things. So when we draft something in a meeting, we need to make sure it's drafted and ready to go out. We spent way too much time and lost a lot of valuable time just reviewing and approving certain items. And I think that's part of what we need to do, is to figure out how do we get those things done quicker, and that we meet the requirements of the state, but also get our work done. I think that having a way to track the items that are incomplete and that aren't getting through, and then a way to track those are important for us to be able to move ourselves forward. And I also think we need to get buy-in from both a select board, from the town manager and from everybody that this committee brings value and is a positive thing for the community. Not, I think we've been shut out. That's personally what
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to speak to is, in terms of collaborating more with the BRC, and there's probably other groups we should be collaborating face to face with a little more. This year hasn't been very conducive to that, but I think going forward we should make better efforts to integrate more with other groups and do some of that politicking and that Peter has mentioned. And I think we need to do that a little more.
So those are my thoughts, is that I think there's opportunity for us to have more value to the community, and I think we just got to figure out how to leverage it. And I think actually with the Zoom stuff, that maybe this is an opportunity to get a quorum of both BRC, the Energy Committee, and the Sustainability Group to be able to sit there and have a forum. And I'm not sure what that forum would look like, but I think it would have to be somewhat structured, so that each group had an opportunity to talk about what their visions are, and then have a discussion after that. I did listen to some of the conversations about in the budget committee, the groups that are working on, multimodal, some of the planning initiatives that are going on in the community. What I find is that there's a lot of initiatives, and this goes back to Amanda. The foundational information is like the right there is, to me, the word, because I listened to all of these different groups talking about sidewalks and multimodal transportation conversations, and all these different studies that were being recommended and were being funded and across the entire community. But there was nowhere that I saw that these things were sewn together. There was basically like, one group over here, one group up here, one group down here, and all vying for dollars. And then people would ask, well, so-and-so wants that for this. Why aren't we working with this group to connect them together? And that's part of what this committee started out is that it was trying to be more of the glue, right? The glue that actually can begin to pull some of these things, not all of it, but some of it together. And I don't know how you do that, but I think we've got to, by having the groups talk more would be probably one of the ways to start.
Yeah. One other thing, Rob, I'd suggest too is maybe at the beginning of the year, in one of our first meetings in January, we could just kind of draft critical dates throughout the year, and then maybe talk about what kind of deliverables we want to have to address those. Because I'm with Amanda, I'm not as fully up on what is due when. I just know well, they really get heavily into budget season, and then we go to vote, in March. And a lot of that other stuff in there, I'm not as keyed into.
Yeah, and part of that really ultimately has to do with accurate reporting on what projects are actually on the docket and what kind of review or kind of where we fit into those processes. I mean, some of the cases, unfortunately, we don't find out until, the budget season started, and guess what? We're already behind. And so I think we got to get ahead of it versus always being behind.
Yeah. If we can get plugged in a little better so we have a better idea of what's going on.
So I think we've talked a couple times about delegates to other committees, and maybe that's something we can get a list of the committees and just figure out the delegates and how we're going to handle those. And then the other thing, I don't know how I forgot this, but the last two times we talked to Dave, the ADA study wasn't ready to be shared yet, but we definitely that's one of the foundational documents that we need.
Yeah.
And I thought of foundational evaluation tools is better than the first thing I said, but it's still not great.
No, it's
so just Peter, if you're quoting me, it's better.
No, I think that it's a great way to a great metaphor.
Okay. With all due respect to everybody here on this committee, we had a timeline for inputting into the budget process. It was a timeline that was created as part of the process of getting our charge approved by the select board. The fact that we took too long or that we were at the last minute doing things is not necessarily a reflection of the fact that we didn't have key dates.
Nope.
So I think, it's incumbent upon us to pay attention to what we do and have done in the past as far as providing our own foundational schedules and information. I agree with everything you guys have said, but I'm a little bit frustrated about the fact that we had at least for the CIP projects and the budget process, we had that. We just didn't necessarily follow it the way we should have.
I agree. So part of what I said, Peter, is that we need to find a process to review because it took us 3 times to get through the recommendations. So that's 6 weeks. So 6 weeks to review one item took up 3 meetings. We were, but part of that was to look at where we need to make those improvements. And I think that's one of them. And I think we've got to get to, in a meeting, be able to draft what we're going to talk about, agree on what we're going to say, and that's it. Done. No paraphrasing after the fact, nothing else. If this is what would happen, we do have the opportunity the next time we have a meeting to revise or to basically say, yes, the meeting minutes, I didn't say I said this. We have an opportunity, but we need to figure out how to get this stuff answered in our meeting so that we meet the RSA requirements. And I think, I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. And I want to make sure that we figure out how we do that.
I agree.
It's all Mark's fault.
And just to speak to one of the things we did right this year, or a couple things, the facility tours were good. And it would be helpful to note the basis for those was, in lieu of the FCA, we're going to do our own investigation. We're not going to do all the work of the FCA necessarily, but at least we're going to start to develop our own notions of the facilities, their priorities, and that sort of thing. And the other thing, basically by going on the public safety tours and the DPW tours, and then the way we developed the RFP process, that's something that, I think that could really help the town, because for public safety, they were looking at doing the same process that they did on the rec center. And, I think the process that we came up with would be more helpful to the town in that it would get a lot more input early on. It could help establish a budget, and we wouldn't be so far down the road with plans before we got agreement on these projects. So, the site visits were important, but those are the couple big factors of why we did them too.
Yeah, I think that's great point, Chris.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So if I look at a calendar, 2 weeks out from today
is the week after Christmas. Or no, I'm sorry. It's
actually on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. I would suggest skipping that and the week after, and maybe the first week of January, that Thursday.
So if we skipped, we would end up going to the 7th.
Yeah.
January 7th.
Yeah. Which I think is okay. I don't think we have anything pressing.
Well, yeah, we do. And I hate to be the Grinch that stole Christmas.
Okay.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't. But, and this may be a test case, Rob, for how fast we can get something done. And that is, we need to find out the select board's timetable for deliberation of the budget. And if they're going to hit, and we can pray and hope it's going to be later in January, not earlier in January. But if it's earlier in January, and if it's the meeting, if that's the meeting where we're supposed to have given our input, then each of us has to figure out, okay, what do we do to get our input into the select board at that time? And if it's, and I just don't know when that time is, because we don't know what their schedule is. And the only way we know that is to get Daryl to tell us, or to get Nico to tell us. So that's why I think it's all fine to tentatively say the 7th, but we do have this big, big unknown. Now, Rob, the way I think to shorten the time we spend doing the recommendations is, if we want to use the Budget Recommendations Committee letter as a template, then somebody can change the wording if they want, or if we want, in advance, to beef up the argument with the Budget Committee, so that that's something we present as part of our letter. And then and it's at that, whatever meeting we have to do that letter is a one-time meeting. And we, as Rob says, we're all done. We agreed on it at the end, and nobody gets a chance 2 days later to have second thoughts.
So if I was going to, one thought I had, Peter, per your comment, is that literally just taking the draft we have right now, right, and change the names of from budget recommendations to select board. And the one thing that we could do is, as an addendum to that, is a statement about the process which we believe guarantees or gives the town a better opportunity for success is by following the process which we've outlined in our RFP, in our recommendation.
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
No, I mean, I'm just, you don't have to write it down. Just, this is a discussion, not a.
Yeah. No, I think that's good.
What are your thoughts, Amanda?
Yeah, and I'd just like to detail a couple of those components of why. Yeah. Yep.
So I think if we start out with the idea that we already have a letter of recommendation, and then what you're talking about really is bolstering that recommendation, I think should be easy for us to come up with quick language and bulleted items and be done with that. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And Rob, are you going to reach out to Daryl or Nico?
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to Daryl.
All right.
And
I mean, we can do a one-off special meeting, like you said, just to tackle that one topic and agree on it. Yeah, we can do that the week after Christmas if we had to.
So I'll find out what their schedule is when they're planning on. I know that the 15th, there's the due date for the committees to have their summary, the year's 2020 summary to the town, in preparation of the wrapping up the entire kind of end of year information.
I actually like the idea of a one-off special meeting just to do these if we're doing a letter or some sort of recommendation, because when we do it in a general meeting, we've got a million agenda items. We're kind of all thinking of a million different things. And I think that's why when we go to do our input on the letter, it's easy for me to step back and think of other things later that I want to change or add. So maybe going forward, if we do one of these special meetings, whenever we want to do a deliverable, maybe it'll help us focus and get something done quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
All right. Well, you folks have donated another hour plus to the community.
Yes.
You're going to get back. Don't worry. Your taxes will be a little lower next year, and your water and sewer bill is going to be lower. So you're.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not. I forgot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's the alternative universe. That's the alternative universe you're in.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I have a question. You've got the last set of electrons, don't you, Rob, for the letter that went to the budget committee?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to send, who's going to do the changes to that in the way you've discussed it already? Are you going to do that?
Sure. I could.
I don't mind too. Yeah, whatever. I'm open to it. If you
know.
All right, Chris, I nominate you.
Okay, I'll do it.
And so that'll be the draft. Chris is going to do the working draft for our letter to the select board.
Yep.
And
Excellent.
I just have a couple date questions. So we'll find out what the date is that we need for a possible special meeting. And then will that be the same deadline date for me with the question we have for public safety?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'll just
that'll
wait
help.
on that date. I mean, I can probably today's Thursday. So if I can get it tomorrow, I will, but, and then what was the date we had for our next regular meeting? I thought we were still talking about it, so I didn't write it down.
It's January 7th. I will send out a meeting maker.
Okay. Oh, it's already on there. Okay, perfect. It just skips the 24th and continues on our same schedule. Perfect. Yep. Okay.
Amanda, getting the feedback from the police and fire departments is really, I think, critical in terms of knowing if they really have bought into what the budget committee says. Even better if they haven't, because we could highlight in our letter that they don't agree. We don't have to tell them we're going to highlight it in our letter, but if it turns out that they don't agree with what the budget committee wants and they want to do what we prefer as the right approach, as soon as we know that, the better Chris can incorporate that into the letter.
Well, I'll contact them either Friday or Monday, but I'm thinking, I don't know if I'll get a response.
Yeah,
so
you probably won't talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
My answer could come back as I didn't get a response, just like we had with other of these inquiries. So I don't know. I'll just put the feelers out, or I'll put the question out.
Right. No, I'm not saying that to hurry up, but let me say this: if you don't get a response, I think, Rob, you have to decide whether or not you go to Russ to get a response. Because I think it's important enough. We had independent discussions with the police department and the fire department, and they led us to believe that they were comfortable with our approach.
Sure.
They led the budget committee. They led the budget committee to believe they were comfortable with their approach. So a non-response isn't going to help us. Well,
here's my thought on this is that if we reach out to them and they don't respond, that ultimately as a committee, I think I would still make the exact same recommendation, whether they believed that there was an alternative or not. That I ultimately think that our decision should be independent. It should be based upon our experience and our belief in what that process should be. Mm-hmm. So if they agree with it, great. If they don't agree with it, tough luck.
I agree with you, but we need to know one way or the other, just so we know to deal with the political stuff. I agree with you on substance. And if we're worried about being taken for granted or worried about not being effective, this is an opportunity to.
Yeah, and Amanda, you might not be able to couch it so directly to them, so you might just have to ask a few questions around the periphery to try to suss out what their thoughts really are, you know?
Right.
I think to date...
Do my best diplomatic.
Yes, exactly.
A little more diplomatic
I think they're
mindset here.
They're open to plans that will get them something, so
I have
don't know.
I have one question. Does it make sense for us to take a copy of our recommendations to the Budget Recommendation Committee and actually send it directly to both of the chiefs so that it's a primer to, what you're going to have a conversation with them about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's transparent and it makes it less out of left field. And who is this woman?
Yeah, I think that would be, to me, a good way of leading into the conversation is to say, this is what we have given to it, and included in that is the copy of the RFP that we drafted up and worked with Dave Sharples with. So I think that there's a good summary of the work we put into that, and it gives them insight into our thought process before you have that conversation.
Do you want to send that to them, or do you want me to send that to them?
I would actually like it to come from you, Amanda.
Okay, so is email acceptable for that?
Yeah, they respond to email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
In fact, you could send it to them first and just say, hey, I'm thinking I'd like to call you sometime next week and discuss this further with you. So That might be a good way to set that up.
Yeah, I think it's that way they're prepared for it. They know what the information is, and I also gives them contact, a name with the document, and then so I think it's a good way to reach out.
Yeah, I'm all for context. So, Peter, the most recent, the one that we actually sent, do I have that?
You mean a letter to the Budget Recommendations Committee? Mm-hmm. Rob has the latest electrons on that. So
okay.
I think I think all of us, Peter, I think you copied all of us on it, but I can send it over to you.
Okay, just so I make sure I have the last one.
Yeah, and I want to make sure it's
Perfect.
Copy all us. If you don't mind copying us all again, Rob, that'd be really helpful.
All right, who's ready for dinner?
Are you serving?
I'm going to get takeout tonight.
Move really? Adjourn.
What's that?
Do I have
Yeah, I second the motion to adjourn.
Okay, and who are you?
Oh, I'm Chris Weeks. I think Peter moved to adjourn.
Yeah, I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Peter Lennon, I move we adjourn.
Yeah, Chris Weeks, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'm sending this thing now.